We flip a switch, we fill up our cars, and the whole modern world just works. But behind all that convenience is this massive, high stakes, multi billion dollar global treasure hunt. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the incredible economics of finding and producing the fossil fuels that, well, power just about everything.
It really all boils down to this one question. I mean, how in the world do you find something you can't even see, something that's hidden miles deep inside the Earth? Well, it's a wild mix of geology, physics, and honestly, a ton of financial risk. And when I say risk, I am not kidding. A single exploration project, just one shot at finding a deposit, can easily cost over 10 million bucks. And here's the crazy part. There is absolutely no guarantee you'll find anything worth pulling out of the ground. It is genuinely one of the biggest gambles in the entire business world. So this brings us to Act 1 of our story, the search. This is the exploration phase, and it's this fascinating process of elimination, really. It takes you from a satellite view of the entire planet all the way down to one single spot on a map where you hope a drill will strike it rich.
The best way to think about it is like a giant funnel, right? You're just narrowing down the possibilities at each step. It starts super broad with surface studies, literally looking at satellite photos for promising geology from space. Then you get closer, using geophysical tools to measure tiny changes in gravity and magnetism to sort of map out what's below. The last big step before you write a huge check is the seismic survey, which gives you a pretty detailed 3D map. But only after all that do you take the most expensive and final step. You actually drill a hole. And this, right here, just nails the core problem. Even with all our incredible, futuristic technology, finding oil is not an exact science. At its heart, it's still a high-risk game of trial and error. You can have the best data in the world, but until you actually drill, you just don't know if you've got a gusher or a really, really expensive dry hole. So that leads to the multi-million-dollar question, doesn't it? With these staggering costs and absolutely no guarantee of a payoff, how on earth does a company decide to take that final, incredibly expensive leap of faith and actually start drilling? Well, they do it with a really powerful little tool called expected monetary value, or EMV for short. The easiest way to think about EMV is as a formula for making smart bets. It's a way to systematically weigh the potential prize against the cost of playing the game and, crucially, the odds of you actually winning. And at its core, the formula is actually pretty straightforward. You take the chance of success, say 15%, and you multiply it by the potential value of what you might find. That's the net present value, which is just a fancy way of saying all the future profits in today's money. Then from that number, you subtract what it's going to cost you to look in the first place. It's a way to bring cold, hard math to what feels like a pure gamble. But here's the thing, that potential value is tied directly to the price of oil, which means this whole calculation is a constantly moving target. Okay, let's make this real with a quick example. Imagine a project where you've only got a 15% shot at success. But if you hit, that discovery is worth a cool $100 million. And the cost to drill that first exploratory well, that's $10 million. So you gotta ask, is the gamble worth it? Well, you run the numbers through that EMV formula. 15% of $100 million is $15 million. Then you subtract your $10 million cost, and you're left with a positive $5 million. And that right there is the key. A positive EMV is the green light. It tells the company that, yeah, even with a low chance of success, the potential reward is just so big that, statistically speaking, it's a bet worth taking. The search is officially on. All right, so the bet paid off. The drill hits oil. That's great news, right? Well, yes, but this brings us to Act 2, the discovery. Because finding the treasure is one thing, knowing if it's actually worth digging up is a whole other economic puzzle. And this is where we have to get a really important distinction straight. The difference between resources and reserves. Resources are basically an estimate of everything that might be down there. But reserves are the good stuff. That's the oil that is both proven to be there and is profitable to get out of the ground with today's technology and at today's prices. And this little chart, which is a simple version of what's called a McKelvey diagram, is how they sort the treasure. Everything they find gets put into one of these boxes based on two simple questions. First, how sure are we that it's actually there? And second, can we make any money pulling it out? The ultimate prize is to get your discovery into that top left box, proven, profitable reserves. Now, here's the part that's so critical to understand. The amount of that proven loot isn't set in stone. Not at all.
A big deposit of oil that's just too expensive to extract today? That's just a resource. But what if the price of oil suddenly skyrockets, or some brand new technology makes it way cheaper to get out? All of a sudden, that same pile of rock can become a hugely valuable reserve almost overnight.
So, once a discovery is confirmed as a good-to-go, viable reserve, we get to enter our final act, the payoff. This is the production phase, where the long-term economics of actually bringing all that energy to the surface really kick in.
You see, getting all the oil out of the ground happens in stages. At first, you get a free ride. The natural pressure in the reservoir does most of the work for you. That's primary recovery. But when that pressure starts to fade, companies start actively pushing more oil out by injecting water or gas. That's secondary recovery. And finally, they can bring in the really advanced and more expensive methods, like using steam or chemicals. That's tertiary recovery. Each stage gets you more oil, but each stage costs more money too.
And this brings us to a core economic truth of oil production, which this chart shows perfectly. You have these absolutely massive, upfront fixed costs to develop the field, building the platforms, the pipelines, the whole shebang. But once all that is built, the day-to-day variable cost to just pump one more barrel of oil is actually pretty small in comparison. So the crucial point here is that those huge upfront costs are sunk. You've already spent the money, you can't get it back. So that changes how a producer thinks. They will keep the pumps running as long as the price they can get for a barrel of oil is high enough to cover that small day-to-day operating cost. They don't need to cover the billion-dollar investment in their daily decisions. And this right here explains a market dynamic you've probably seen in the news. It's why even when oil prices crash, you often see rigs keep on pumping. For each individual company, it makes perfect economic sense. But when everyone does it, it can flood the market with supply, which can push prices down even more. It's a classic paradox.
Okay, so let's zoom all the way out now and look at the bigger picture. When you take all these individual fields and their unique economics, it all adds up to this vast, incredibly complex global supply game. And every single oil field in the world follows this same predictable life cycle. There's a development phase where production ramps up, then you hit a plateau where it's pumping steadily for a while, and then inevitably comes the decline phase, where output starts to fall as the field runs out. It's just a fact of geology. Nothing lasts forever.
So what you're left with is this continuous cycle that's at the very heart of the entire industry. It all begins with a high-risk, speculative search that leads to a massive investment to develop a reserve. That reserve is then produced and drained until it's depleted, which forces the whole process to start all over again somewhere else.
In the end, it's pretty wild to think that every single drop of fuel we use is the result of a massive billion-dollar bet that somebody made years, maybe even decades ago. It's a whole system built on risk, geology, and economics, which really just leaves us with one final thought. As our technology and our energy markets keep changing, you have to wonder, what will the next great treasure hunt be for?